73歳の被爆者が来るときって皆さんどんな人を想像しましたか？元気そうに見えますか？
Hello. So when you first heard that you were going to meet a 70-year-old Hibakusha, a survivor of the atomic bombing, what did you think? Who did you think you're going to see? Do I look pretty well for that?
3月11日、去年ですが、福島で原子プラントの事故が起きましたけど、そのことについても話したいのですが、まずその前に私たち原爆の被爆者はですね、核の恐ろしさを体験しているんですね。そのことから話していきたいと思います。
So I would like to touch upon the Fukushima incident that happened last year. But I myself, as an atomic bombing survivor, I really feel the effect of radiation and everything. So now, first of all, I would like to talk about my own experience, and then move on to talk about Fukushima afterwards.
ある人が聞きました。原子爆弾は兵器で戦争の時に起こった。だけど産業のための原子プラントとちょっと違うんじゃないかっていうふうに言う人がいました。
There's a point where somebody asked me or told me, I think there's a difference between nuclear weapon as opposed to nuclear power, because nuclear power is really just it's your energy. So I was asked that question once.
しかし原子を使うと同じように被爆者を作るんですね。で福島は原発事故を起こしたので、今も自分の国でね被爆者を作り続けてるんです。一番核の怖い放射能の怖いことを知っていた日本人が今また作ってるんですね。
But really, I tell them one thing that's common between the two is that both actually create the people who suffer from the effects of radiation, whether it's nuclear power plants or whether it's a nuclear weapon. And Japanese, we know what really happens when the radiation affects people. And as Japanese, we let that happen again in Fukushima. And as we speak, there are people who are getting effects of radiation right now.
それは私たち原爆の被害者、被爆者がですねあまり自分たちの経験を語ってこなかったんですね。一部の人は語っていました。その責任を今感じているんですね。だからこうして来て話しています。
I feel responsible because I feel like there haven't been enough people who actually went through the atomic bombings, who survived it, that there aren't enough of them who share their own experiences so that we really know what it is and what it does. And this is why I now go around the world and share my own experiences, because I really feel the need to do it and I feel responsible for doing it. I feel the need to do it.
原爆は破壊力とそして熱線を含んでますね。それでの被害もたくさんあります。そのことからも話します。そして後で一番恐ろしいのは放射能のことですね。
So it's not only the radiation, even though radiation is really horrible. What the atomic bombs include is also the very strong the heat rays, and also the blast. So those are really devastating as well.
私は6歳と10ヶ月の時広島のキノコ雲の下にいて被爆しました。そこは 2.3 キロゼロポイントから離れたところでした。
It was when I was 6 years and 10 months old. That's when the atomic bomb was dropped in Hiroshima. And where I was at the time was only 1.7 miles away from the blast center.
しかし目の前であまりに多くの人が子供や大人が死んだのでそのことを忘れていけなければ将来を考えることができなかったんです。
But because what I witnessed at the time was so many dead bodies of the older people, young people, just about everybody, so I just had to forget about what I saw in order to move on with life. I just couldn't really think about it for a long time.
そのことを私は子供にも話さずに来ました。しかしそのトラウマから私は一生逃げることができません。
Because of that, I never really shared my story so much, not even with my own children, but I myself can never run away from my own traumatizing experiences.
しかし私は幸いにも エナメルミュラルアートという工芸の作家です。
But luckily for myself, I'm an artist and I create a lot of art pieces using enamel mural art.
それで私はその作品の中にこっそり核にどうでしょうか、核をその拒否するメッセージを入れて自分の心を癒していました。もしそのメッセージを入れなければ私の作品は完成しなかったんです。
So as for me, it's really a spiritual healing process for me to create my art pieces, because as I make them, I put the message of not wanting to have those weapons anymore. And so yeah, I put these messages into my art pieces, and that's what really perfect my own artwork.
後でその作品の一部を写真でお見せします。もし興味がある人は見てください。それはそうですね。
Later on, I'll have them around here. So if you would like to take a look at them, please go ahead after we're all done with the speeches.
それはあまりメッセージが表に強く出てません。それは自分自身のためだったからですね。だけど皆さんは若く感性の素晴らしいニューヨークを代表した多分アートの感性を持った人たちだと思うので、どうぞこれを見て何か感じてもらったらとても私は幸せです。
You might not see my messages so directly in my art pieces because they're really for myself, for my own spiritual healing. But you with young people with strong artistic senses, you might get the messages that I put in a very subtle way, and I'd be really happy if you sense anything from my art pieces.
1945年8月の6日朝8時15分、私は小学校の1年生で学校へ行く途中でした。
So the atomic bombing in Hiroshima happened on August 6th in 1945. At 8:15 in the morning, I was an elementary school student and I was just about to go to school. I was walking there.
B29、爆撃機ですけど、アメリカの飛行機が来たというので、思わず空を見上げました。2機の飛行機が見えました。
So I was walking, I heard somebody shouting, "Oh my God, in the sky, you see there's like 2 airplanes, they're the B-29 bombers." So I looked up into the sky and I saw 2 planes.
途端にものすごく強烈な熱線が襲ってきました。光が襲ってきました。そして思わず右手で顔を隠したので、頭と右腕と首にやけどをしました。
The second I looked up, I just couldn't see anything. There was the beam of very strong rays, and instantly I covered my face with my right arm. So I got burned really badly on my head, on my right arm, and on my left side of my neck. That's where I got burned.
そのうち辺りは闇夜のように真っ黒になりました。それは舞い上がった砂ぼこりだったんですね。爆風で舞い上がったわけです。
And then the next thing I remember, it was pitch dark. And the reason it was dark was because it was all covered with the dust that was created from the blast.
遠くから見たらそれはキノコ雲の形に見えたと言います。
Then I was told later on that if you looked at it from far away, the whole thing looked like a mushroom cloud.
口の中に入った砂ぼこりがジャリジャリしました。体内被爆をしたと思います。
I still remember that there was the dust that came into my mouth and how sandy it felt. And I know that I got affected, I got poisoned by the radiation for that as well.
そのうちに猛烈な痛みがやってきて泣きながら家に帰りました。家はめちゃめちゃに壊れてました。
Then the next thing, I was going through this tremendous pain from the burns on my skin, and I was just crying walking back to the direction of my house. And then when I got back, my house was completely destroyed.
その破れた家の屋根の上に青空がその時は広がっていました。それを子供の私はとても美しいと思ったんですね。痛いのに美しいと思ったわけです。
One strange thing I still remember is that when my house was really destroyed, but then there was this little hole in the cover in the ceiling on the roof, through which I could see the little patch of blue sky. And as a child, somehow I thought it was really pretty. I mean, I was going through a tremendous pain, but I thought it was really pretty.
天が生きる勇気を与えてくれたと今は思っています。だから前向きに見て生きることを覚えたんですね。だから元気に見えるかもしれませんね。
I feel like it really was a gift for me that, you know, that I was able to see this little patch of blue sky, and which gave me the hope to live through my life. And I think that's part of the reason that I've always tried to live positively.
幸い母は無事でした。だけど私を見ても自分の子供だと分からなかったんですね。それはあまり私のフィギュアが変わっていったからです。
Luckily, my mother was okay, but the second she saw me, she actually couldn't recognize who I was because I just looked like a completely different person.
髪の毛は焼け焦げてジリジリ、そして手足は真っ黒ですね。服は破れて、もう本当にボロ切れのようだったと思います。
All my hair was all burned, and then my face and my arms, they were all burned, and then my clothes are all ripped and torn because of the blast, so I just looked completely different.
そのうちに生き残った人たちが瀕死の状態で私の家の前に逃げてきました。みんな裸同然でした。服は焼けてました。
And then eventually I started seeing a lot of people who are nearly half dead. They were just like walking so slowly towards the direction of my house. And most people had their clothing were all burned and they're nearly naked.
彼らはやけどでむけた自分の皮膚を肩からむけた皮膚を指先に垂らして前に伸ばしていました。みんなそのようにしていました。まるで幽霊の行列のようでした。
It looked like a bunch of ghosts walking in town because all of them had their arms hanging in front, and from their arms there was ripped skin hanging, and they couldn't really speak either, so it really just looked like a bunch of ghosts walking.
皆さんはサラダを作るときトマトを湯むきをしたことがあると思うんですが、人間の皮膚にもそれが起こります。
Perhaps you guys might have cooked tomatoes before, like you grill tomatoes and stuff, and that and you see tomato skin peeling from that.
若い私のおばも死んでしまいました。そして叔父の一家は赤ちゃんがおりましたが6人とも全滅です。
So the same thing with the tomatoes can happen on people, and not only that. So basically, as for my family, my aunt who was in her 20s, she died, and also my uncle's family, which included a newborn child. So all 6 of them also died.
そして家の前に逃げてきた人はみんな倒れて死んでいきました。
And a lot of the people that I saw, who were walking towards the direction of my house, a lot of them just eventually collapsed on the ground as they died.
一発の原爆で14万人が広島で死に、長崎では7万人が死にました。
So one atomic bomb in Hiroshima killed 140,000 people, which in Hiroshima killed 70,000 people.
しかしそれでは済まないんですね。それから長い間放射線の影響で大勢の人が死に続けました。
But it wasn't only that. The people who even survived also suffered from the effects of radiation, which continued for generations afterward.
私はその世から高熱が出て1週間近く意識がありませんでした。しかし病院も焼けドクターも死んでいますので治療ができません。母は私が死ぬと思っていたそうです。
From that very evening, I started having really high fever, and I lost my consciousness for about a week. But all the hospitals were burned, and the doctors were dead, so I just couldn't be treated. And my mother said that she thought I was going to die.
音楽や詩を愛する優しい父はその時国家の命令で戦争に行って留守でした。
And my father, who was a very peaceful person who loved music and poems, he was ordered by the government to go participate in a war at the time, so he wasn't home then.
私が奇跡的に命を取り留めて最初に気づいたのは街を耐え難い悪臭でした。膨大な遺体を毎日学校の校庭などで焼いていたんです。
When I began my consciousness, the first thing that I noticed was this horrible smell that covered the entire city, and it was coming from the parks and schools because that's where they were burning the massive number of dead bodies.
その作業やその遠くの町から来てその作業をしていた人たちも後に残留放射能を受けて被爆者となってがんになり死に続けています。
And the people who are working at these sites where they're burning dead bodies, they were coming from the towns far away, but because of what they were doing, they also got effects of the radiation, and eventually these people also started developing cancers, and a lot of them died.
皆さんは貞子と折り鶴の話を知っているかもしれません。彼女は私の中学校の4歳年下の生徒でした。
Perhaps you guys might have heard of Sadako and her paper cranes. She and I went to the same middle school, and she was 4 years younger than me.
広島では貞子だけではなく、もう何千人もの人が貞子と同じような病気で死にました。
Well, Sadako died of leukemia, but in Hiroshima, it wasn't just Sadako. So many people also died like that afterwards. I mean, throughout the time.
私も10代から放射能の影響が出ました。唇や口の中ですね、それに出来物ができて年中傷んでご飯が飲み込めませんでした。そして甲状腺が腫れました。とても若いのに非常にいつもというんでしょうかね、倦怠感があってよく倒れました。
I also started having radiation sickness when I was a teenager. And the symptoms included that my throat was infected and it always felt really hot, and I had all sorts of infections around my mouth, and my thyroid was also swollen, and it was very hard for me to eat food. I was young, but I also had this very strong sense of apathy where I just didn't feel like I was motivated to do anything.
そして骨が弱くなったんですね。そしてこれは2世にまで影響するんですね。私の息子の2世の骨に異常が出ました。そのことで子供の時にいじめられたことがあります。
And it also affected my eyesight and also my bones. My bones have always been really weak. And the thing with radiation is that it can affect your next generation. So due to that, my second child, my son, also was born with the deformity in his chest bone. So that was really hard for our family.
妹も被爆者ですが、2人の妹の子供たちも甲状腺を患っています。1人は20代で20歳の時がんで甲状腺がんで手術をしました。
And also, my sister's 2 children, they also suffer from the effects of radiation. So one of her kids, when she was 20, went through an operation because she had a thyroid cancer. And both 2 of them have a problem with thyroid.
原爆の後で奇形児もたくさん生まれましたが、日本政府とアメリカ政府の考えで日本政府も同調して核の被害はなかったということに決めた時期がありました。それは6年間続きました。
And right after the atomic bomb, there were so many children who were born with physical deformities, but there was a treaty between the American government and the Japanese government not to speak about the atomic bombs, not to speak about the radiation, so that for 6 years after the bomb was dropped, we didn't really know what was going on, and we didn't know about the radiation, and we didn't talk about it.
それは原子炉をそれから作る政策があったからです。被爆者は誰も被害を話すことを嫌がりました。そして一部の人だけが運動や活動はしていました。
The reason for that was because there was a plan to build nuclear power plants, so we didn't really talk about it. We were not really allowed to talk about this. So there were only a very small number of the Hibakusha's atomic bomb survivors who shared their stories at the time.
その結果、地震が頻発する狭い国土に54基もの原子プラントを作って、その結果福島の事故が起きました。
As a result, basically, we led the Japanese government to build 54 nuclear reactors in a very small land of Japan where we have earthquakes very frequently.
広島の被爆者はそれを語ってこなかった、被害の恐ろしさを語ってこなかったことを非常に責任を感じております。
As the survivor of the atomic bombs, I feel very responsible that we didn't, as myself being the survivor of the nuclear, the radiation effects, we didn't share our stories enough.
その上、原子炉はプルトニウムという核爆弾にいつでも転用できる原料を作り続けるんですね。
And what the nuclear reactors really produce is this thing called plutonium, which can always be turned into nuclear weapons.
その上、使用済みの核燃料は捨てるところがどこにもないんです。フィンランドの地下を掘って埋めようという話も今進んでおりますが、日本やアメリカの使用済みの核燃料まで引き受けてはくれないでしょう。
And the problem with these nuclear waste, spent nuclear fuel, is that there's no place to really ultimately store them. So I heard that there's an idea to dig the ground really deep in Finland so that they can put their nuclear waste in there, but I don't really suppose that they can take the ones from America or Japan.
放射能の半減期は10万年と言われます。日本は原発にもスリーマイルアイランドの事故にもチェルノブイリにも学ばないで、今も被爆者を作っているわけですね。
I hear that the half-life of radioactive substances is about 100,000 years. So basically, I feel that Japan did not learn from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki experiences, and not from the 3 Mile Island incident, and not from Chernobyl, and we still keep creating Hibakushas who suffer from the radiation.
一般市民の私も勉強する必要を感じたんですね。それでメディアの報道を一方的に信じるだけでなく、この目で何が起こったのかをチェルノブイリに行って学ぼうと思いました。26年前に起こった事故ですね。
You guys probably know what happened in Chernobyl 26 years ago. So I'm just a regular civilian, but I felt the need to really study and learn what really had happened there. So just last month, I went over to the actual place, to Chernobyl, and to see what really happened there, which might not be reported through the main media.
そこではやはり知らないことがいっぱいありました。廃炉にすることに26年前に決めたのに、今も4000人の人が高い放射能の下で廃炉にするための作業をしています。
So 26 years ago, when the accident happened, they decided to decommission the whole facility. But really, what I saw was that, so 26 years later, there 4,000 workers are still working there to cool down the nuclear reactors that went wrong.
でチェルノブイリでは事故直後に28人の人が簡単な服装で消火作業をしたので、その人たちは2週間後に全部死んでしまった。
In Chernobyl, when the accident happened, there were 28 people who immediately went into the facility, to the reactor, to fix the problem, but they weren't equipped well enough, and all of them, 28 people, died within a matter of a week afterwards.
その後の26年間に1000人以上の人ががんで死にました。がんなどで死にました。
And now it's been 26 years, and there have been more than 1,000 people who died by working at this facility, and they died from cancers and all sorts of radiation sicknesses.
そして石棺というんです。コンクリートで今事故を起こした4号炉をカバーしてるんですけど、それからも放射能が漏れているので、また別のシェルターをですね作ってかぶせようと作業していました。
And they were still working right now to build a whole new cover, very heavy walls and basically a cover made out of really thick concrete to prevent the radiation from leaking. So there's still a bunch of people working there.
私はそこで線量計を測ってみましたが、線量計はもう動きませんでしたね。振り切れてしまって役に立たなかったです。
So I brought this thing called Geiger counter with me, which detects the level of radiation at the point. So when I used that at the Chernobyl site now, just last month, it couldn't even detect the number because the whole thing just like went off the regular scale.
日本の原発はたまたま定期点検というのがあって、テストのためこの5月5日にですね全部止まってます。4基は廃炉にしましたけども、これは放射線を出し続けますから、40年も100年も廃炉のための作業が必要です。
So right now, as for the nuclear power plants in Japan, all 54 reactors we have over there, well, 4 of which belong to Fukushima, and they're all decommissioned by now, even though they keep leaking radiation. They were all stopped as of May 5th because of the periodical checkups, even the ones that are not in Hiroshima.
国民からは再稼働させないで持続可能なエネルギーに転換してくださいと政府にお願いしてますね。しかし一部の人たちは自分たちの利益を守るためにまた再稼働させたがっています。
So a lot of Japanese people are now asking the Japanese government to not to restart those nuclear power plants, but to convert to more sustainable energy. But there are also some people in Japan who want to have them restarted because of the economy, because of the money that's involved with the nuclear power industry.
最近のニュースで日本の津波で流されたサッカーボールが2000キロ離れたアラスカで拾われました。
I saw on the news recently that there's this soccer ball that was carried by the tsunami when the whole tsunami happened in Japan last year, and after over a year, this soccer ball was found on the coast of Alaska, which is 1,500 miles or more, or around that, 1,500 miles away from Japan.
中にはコンテナごとに流されたオートバイもありました。それはハーリー・デビッドソンでした。
There was also not just a soccer ball, but there was a huge motorbike that was carried by the tsunami, which was found in Alaska. It was a Harley Davidson huge bike.
一旦海が汚れれば、これは日本だけの話ではないんですね。世界中に広がっていくんです。放射能も同じなんですね。
So basically, once you contaminate the ocean, it's not just Japan. It can circulate around the world. It can contaminate the whole world.
私は被爆者として何か行動を起こす必要があってこうしてここで話しています。
And I, as a Hibakusha, I really feel strongly that I need to share my stories with everyone in the world, and that's why I'm here with you guys today.
平和な世界は爆弾も放射能も起こってくない綺麗な青空がね、若い人のうち将来に広がっていることだと思います。
I believe that the peaceful world contains, is the world in which you don't have to go through the bombings, that where all the children in the world can see the beautiful blue sky, and that's what I believe is the peaceful world.
その思いを皆さんと共有できれば、いずれ核のない社会ができると思うんですね。私たちで被爆者は最後にしたいと思います。どうぞ皆さん協力してください。ありがとうございました。
And I believe that we can make a world free of nuclear if you can share the thoughts that I have as well. And I would like for you to join in this activity. Thank you very much for listening. So after Dr. Miller is finished, if you guys feel like it, I put my art pieces over there. So please come around and look at them.
I was just going to say before Dr. Miller starts, just on another, just following up with Toshiko-san, is that those nuclear power plants are far from here. She talked about Japan. She talked about Chernobyl in Russia. What about here in New York? Anything? Some upstate. There are some upstate. In fact, Indian Point is 35 miles from near an older facility. It has, I'm not sure how many reactors does Indian Point have, do you know?
I don't know, but I know that they've had several leaks in the last 4 years.
They've had several leaks, they have several reactors. And if you think about Fukushima and evacuating a 50-mile radius, everything within 50 miles, we're only 35 miles from Indian Point. So it's something to think about when you think about nuclear energy. It's something close to home. And again, something to investigate and educate yourself about.